Okay, algebra students, this video will cover the assignment that required us to solve linear equations that are presented in something other than slope-intercept form. And also later in the assignment, we'll be required to graph linear equations and then solve and graph linear inequalities. So let's get to work. The first problem given to us, number 1, is 8x minus 3y equals negative 24. And the goal here is to get y by itself on the left side and push everything else over to the right side in order to convert this equation right here from this form, which we call standard form, into this form, one of these, which is slope-intercept form. In other words, y equals some slope x plus b. Okay, some y-intercept. So in order to do that, we'll start by writing our equation. 8x minus 3y equals negative 24. And again, what we're doing is we're solving for y. We want to get y by itself. The first step here is to move the 8x term to the right side of the equation. And we do that by subtracting 8x from both sides. Now on the left side, the 8x's cancel. And we're going to rewrite what we have now. Negative 3y equals negative 8x minus 24. Be very careful to keep that minus sign with the term 24. It is by convention that we put the x term in front, and then we have the number that's by itself at the end. So we're just reordering this to make it look like this, because what we're going for again is mx plus b. So we're on our way. Now we need to divide, we need to get rid of that negative 3 from the left side, and it's right now it's multiplied by y, so we have to do the opposite of multiplication, and that's division. So we divide each term in our equation by negative 3. Your work should look exactly like this. Okay, so on the left, the negative 3's cancel out. And we're going to rewrite. And when we rewrite, I'll show you that we're going to make some conventional changes as we rewrite to the way these things are presented over here on the right side. So if you notice, I've canceled out the negative 3's. That leaves y by itself on the left. So y equals, and now when I get to this first term here, I'm going to take the numbers and kind of pull them a little bit away from the x, like this. Negative 8 over negative 3x. So take a moment, pause the video, and notice how negative 8x over negative 3 is exactly the same as negative 8 over negative 3 times x. Okay, so now we have minus 24 over negative 3. Now this is not the end of the equation here, because we still need to get rid of negative signs and simplify this improper fraction. So we'll write y equals again. Now notice that we have negative 8 over negative 3, so negative over a negative gives us a positive. So what we can do is just get rid of those negative signs and write 8, thirds, or 8 over 3, x, and then we have, again, a negative over a negative, so that's going to be plus 24 over 3. Now we're going to do the final step, which is to simplify 24 over 3. Our fraction here can actually simplify to a whole number because 3 can be multiplied by some number to get 24. In other words, 24 divided by 3 gives us a whole number, and that whole number is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. So when I do my final rewrite, say y equals 8 over 3 times x plus 8. And that's the slope-intercept form. We'll identify those points. So our slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So 8 thirds, or 8 over 3, is m. That's the slope. The rise would be 8, and the run would be 3. Plus b, and b, which is the y-intercept, is 8. If I were to graph this, okay, and I'll just show this very briefly here. If I were to start at a y-intercept of 8, so let's just call that dot 0. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I wanted to graph this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, what I could do is, because I don't have a lot of space on this paper, rather than go up 8 and then to the right 3, I could go down 8 and to the left 3. Okay, because that's exactly the same procedure in reverse. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll start at 8 and go down 1, down 2, down 3, down 4, down 5, down 6, down 7, down 8, over 1, over 2, over 3 to the left. Now just to show you that these 2 points right here lie on the curve formed by that line. So if I could find a straight edge, I will draw that in. All right, this will work. So if you were to put this in your graphing calculator, it should look something like that. Okay, with this being the y-axis and this being, this horizontal line here being the x-axis. So we have a y-intercept of 8, and as a matter of fact, we can identify the x-intercept, which we could have found by solving for x, which is always going to have a y value of 0, but the x term is -1, -2, -3. So the x-intercept is -3, 0, and the y-intercept is 0, 8. Okay, and this has a slope of 8 thirds. That's a positive slope. So this wasn't required by the question, but I think it's important that we know how to do that. So now what we'll do is we'll go to our answer choices and find 8 thirds x plus 8, and that's answer choice A. Moving on. Our next equation for number 2 is x minus 2y equals 8. So I have x minus 2y equals 8. Let me just draw a line here so it's clear what we're doing. Now I'm going to work on this. So again, my goal is to get y by itself on the left side and push everything else to the right side. So first, I'll subtract x from both sides. On the left, it cancels, and I'll rewrite what I have. Negative 2y equals, I want to reiterate here, we can't combine anything with 8 and negative x, so they have to just exist independently. So I have positive 8 and negative x. Remember, by convention, I'll write the x term first. So I'll write negative x plus 8. My next step is to divide out the negative 2 from every term in my equation. So, because I want to get rid of it. Right now, it's bonded to the y on the left side by multiplication. So I'll do the opposite of that, which is division. So I'll divide each term by negative 2. On the left side, the negative 2's cancel, and I will now rewrite my equation. Y equals, now this is an important point, hiding in front of the x, in between the negative symbol and the x, is an invisible 1. And that 1's going to be important here because I need to pull those numbers out, just like I did over here with 8/3. I need to pull those numbers out and set them separate from the x so we can clearly identify what the slope is. So I'll pull out a negative 1 over negative 2 times x. This right here seems to be a very common misunderstanding, exactly how to do this. Because it's not written that 1 or negative 1, however the problem is, a lot of times students don't quite know what to do. You don't realize you can kind of pull a 1 out of any variable that doesn't have a number next to it. There's always a 1 that's understood because there's only one x, or in this case, negative 1x. Okay, so now we'll write the rest of our equation as it exists, plus 8 over negative 2. And we're not done yet because we've got to clean this up on the right. But I do have y by itself. So now we'll continue. Y equals, now look at that, I've got a negative 1 over a negative 2. The negative signs cancel each other out, which leaves 1 over 2x, or 1/2 x. And now here I have a negative divided, or a positive divided by a negative. Okay, so what we're going to end up with is a negative, because a positive divided by a negative, the negative is going to win this battle. So I will put minus 8 over 2. Now there's one final step, and that is to simplify this fraction right here. Because 8 divided by 2 is 4, I can write y equals 1/2 x minus 4. So y equals mx plus b. The slope m is 1/2, rise 1, run 2, and the y-intercept is negative 4. Okay, so that graph, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to go into the negative territory, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. So that's negative 4. That's my y-intercept right there. And now I will I can graph this function or this equation by going up 1 and then over 2 to the right. So starting at -4, go up 1, right 2, like that. And then up 1, right 2. So if you wanted to graph this line, you can do so really quickly, just like that. Right? So in this case, the graph looks a little different because it's below the origin point. Okay, that's the x-axis. All right? So that is number 2. We can now find y equals 1/2 x minus 4. Y equals 1/2 x minus 4 is answer choice D. All right, so we'll move on. I'll now move a little more rapidly through these, assuming that you'll go back and watch the first 2 problems if you need extremely careful and detailed instructions. So for number 3, we're given 2x plus 3y equals 9. So what's my first step? I want to get y by itself on the left side, so I'll move the 2x to the right side by subtracting 2x from both sides. Because it's positive, I need to subtract. On the left side, it cancels, and I'll rewrite 3y equals -2x plus 9. Now, I will divide each term by 3. On the left, the 3's cancel, and I'm left with y by itself. Y equals -2 over 3 x plus, now 9/3 can be reduced. 9 divided by 3 is 3, so I can write plus 3. Okay, so we have a slope of -2/3 and a y-intercept of positive 3. So y equals -2/3 x plus 3. That's answer choice A. Okay, so we'll move on to number 4. 11x plus 4y equals 24. Okay, so again, I'll just start by subtracting 11x from both sides. On the right, or rather on the left, the 11x's cancel, and I can rewrite 4y equals -11x plus 24. Divide each term by 4 to get rid of it on the left. Okay, those cancel on the left, leaving y equals -11 over 4 times x plus, now 24 divided by 4 gives me an even quotient of 6, so I can just write 6. So now I'm looking for y equals -11/4 x plus 6, which is answer choice C. Okay, moving on to number 5. 8x plus y equals -1. So what I'll do is start by subtracting 8x from both sides. On the left, they cancel, and y is already by itself. Y equals negative 8x minus 1. And you're finished. There's nothing else to do. So y equals negative 8x minus 1 is C. For number 6, I have x plus 2y equals negative 8. So I'll subtract x from both sides. On the left, they'll cancel, and I have 2y equals negative x minus 8. Almost done. Divide everything, each term, by 2. On the left, the 2's cancel, leaving y by itself. Y equals negative 1 over 2x minus 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now that was a little fast. Remember, there's a 1 hiding in between the negative symbol and the x. So that's where I'm getting the 1 right there. Because there's only one x. If you say, well, how many x's are there? Count the number of x's sitting right there. Well, there's one of them. Okay, and here there are 2 of the y's. So there's a 1x plus 2y. We just don't write the 1 by convention. So we're looking for y equals negative 1/2 x minus 4. Y equals negative 1/2 x minus 4 is answer choice D. Okay, so much for that. Now we're on to the second part of the assignment, where we are going to first solve and then graph these lines. That's why I was graphing them a little earlier. This is where it all becomes super important that we know what we're doing with the y-intercept and slope m as rise over run. So let's deal with the first one here. I am given x minus y equals 0. To solve for y, I subtract x from both sides. Now there's nothing on the right side. That's what the 0 is telling us. So on the left they cancel, and I'll write negative y equals negative x. Now at this point there's 2 ways to go about solving it. There's the fast way, and then there's the technically correct way. So first I'll show the technically correct way, and then I'll show the fast way. Remember, there is a 1 hiding in front of both of those variables. So this is a negative 1y equals negative 1x. If I want to get rid of the negative 1 in front of the y, I need to divide all the terms of the equation by negative 1. Okay, so on the left they cancel, and you have y equals, now take a look at this, negative 1 over negative 1 times x. Now anything, doesn't matter if it's negative, positive, big, small, anything divided by itself is 1. So negative 1 divided by negative 1 just equals 1, so I could write y equals 1x. But we don't write that. We don't write the 1, so we write y equals x. That's the long way of getting to the slope-intercept form. Let's go back to where we were. We had negative y equals negative x. If you're ever presented with this very simple problem and you need to quickly get the negative sign to go away, you can just make everything, you can just change all the signs in the equation. So I can just quickly say plus y equals plus x. If negative y equals negative x, then positive y equals positive x. And then I can just say, well, I'm done. Y equals x. So there are times when this more rigorous, thorough, technically correct way is going to be actually more beneficial. But in simple cases like this, we can kind of jump over a hurdle and just jump to the conclusion. Okay, now how do I graph this? That's kind of the million-dollar question. So go up here and write y equals x, because that is our slope-intercept form. We have a couple of attack strategies here. And of course, we'll show the really old school way of doing it and make a little tiny graph. It doesn't have to be a work of art or so precise that an engineer would appreciate it. It can just be a simple graph. Okay, so there's the origin point. Now, look at this equation, y equals x. Now remember, our slope-intercept form is telling me that I should have y equals mx plus b. So what's m and what's b? Well, remember, there is a 1 hiding in front of the x. So m is 1. What's b? Well, again, we don't write this, but I could say plus 0. So y really, it's not y equals x, it's y equals 1x plus 0. Now that actually helps us graph, because that means that my y-intercept is 0, 0, 0. So that's a point on the line. And then my slope is 1. Okay, so the slope, m, equals 1 over 1. That's the rise over the run. So starting at the y-intercept, which happens to be 0, 0, I can go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, like that. And I'm going to make what actually turns out to be a 45-degree angle with the x-axis right there. And that is the equation y equals x. So before I've even looked at my answer choices, I know what I want. I want an upward sloping line that crosses through the origin. Okay, so right here, answer choice A can be eliminated because it's a downward sloping line that crosses through the origin. Answer choice B is a horizontal line, so that's not right. And then answer choice D and answer choice C are the ones we have to kind of look at. Well, if we look closely at answer choice D, there's two things wrong with it. First of all, it has a y-intercept of 1, not 0, so that can't be D. And secondly, the slope is not 1. It's actually, let's see, 1, 2, 3. I think the slope is 3. I'm not sure, but it's definitely not 1. It's too steep. This line right here that cuts a perfect diagonal through that square graph grid, that is our answer right there. Okay, if you didn't know how to do all this right here, and you just got to y equals x, and you thought, well, now what? Okay, if you're taking the test and you don't know what to do, you can just graph this, y equals x, and that is exactly what we're going to do now on our emulator. So let's go to our calculator, and you should clear the RAM before you do any problems, and that can be accomplished by clicking second plus 7 1 2. Okay, so we've cleared the RAM, and now what I want to do is go to y equals. Now remember, our equation that we found was y equals x. So all I want to do is click X. Okay, we can graph that. We see what it looks like now. And that might help you choose the correct answer choice. So whichever way you prefer to do it is fine with me. Okay, back to our work surface here. We've selected the correct choice C for number 7, and we'll go on to number 8. X plus 3y equals negative 15. So again, my first goal, before I start worrying about graphing, is to get y by itself on the left side and have this thing written in slope-intercept form. Right now it's in standard form. So let's get this thing solved. Subtract x from both sides. On the left, the x's cancel, and I'm going to move this over a little bit. I've got 3y equals negative x minus 15. Okay, at this point, it is super helpful to remember that there is a 1 hiding right there, because I'm about to divide every term by 3. And if I'm careful, see what I did there? I didn't actually draw the division line all the way under the x, because I already know I'm going to end up trying to pull that out to just make that slope off by itself and leave the x term alone. Okay, so let me finish dividing. On the left, the 3's cancel, and I'm left with y equals, now look what I've got to do here. I'm going to write negative 1 over 3x. Negative 1 over 3 times x. Practice that. This is the skill that people need. And then I can subtract minus. Now 15 divided by 3 is 5, so I can write 5 right there. So y equals negative 1/3 x minus 5. So again, we've got two choices here. We can either try to graph this thing by hand, which is what I recommend, or we can go to the graphing calculator. So I'm going to graph it by hand really quickly, just to show you that this is too easy not to do it. Again, it doesn't have to be a masterpiece. Just label your axes. Now let's think about this. All right, the y-intercept is negative 5. So I need to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right there, negative 5. Okay, if you say, hey, how are you drawing the graph because there's no grid lines? Well, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I'm evenly spacing my dots or my lines like that. Okay, so now what is the slope? Well, the slope is negative 1/3. Okay, so let's look at the slope for a second. M equals negative 1 over 3. So that means that's my rise and that's my run. Now, with a negative 1 in the numerator, it really means that I need to go down 1 and then 3 to the right. Alternatively, I could go up 1 and then 3 to the left, but I can tell you already we're going to end up with a, going down the mountain because it's a negative slope. So just keep that in mind as you plot this. If you start plotting a line that's creeping uphill, then you've gone wrong. Okay, so here, let's just going to go down 1, okay, and then over 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so with those 2 points, I can make my line. Right, that's not perfect. It's not machine precise, but that's what I'm looking for. All right, so let's take a look at our answer choices. Here are the key points. I'm looking for a y-intercept of -5. Let's see what we can eliminate with that alone. Okay, so, well, the y-intercept there is 5, not -5, so it can't be A. And let's look at B. Okay, B is a contender. Not sure. So let me hold off on passing judgment. It does have a y-intercept of -5. Looks right. C doesn't have any graph at all, so it can't be C. And then D is downward sloping, but again, it's got that +5 y-intercept, so it can't be D. So we're left with, check this out. Our graph that we drew looks like the graph here. So it's kind of confirmation, right? Now again, if you weren't sure, if you thought, you know what, all this graphing business, I'm just not comfortable with that, or you're pressed for time on the test and you just don't want to hassle with it, go back here, okay, take a look at your equation in slope-intercept form. We're going to put this into the calculator, just like it appears. Let me pull up the calculator again. And I'll clear the memory, 2nd plus 712. And then go to y equals. Now let me clear this key press history so you can watch. Now let me just show you. So I'm going to go to y equals. Okay, here we go, y equals. Then I'm going to hit alpha y equals. And this little window pops up. And what I want to choose is, for the first one, n over d. All right, so hit enter. It's the default choice. Now this little fraction box appears. Hit this negative sign, and then 1, then hit the down arrow, and then hit 3. Now hit the right arrow, then hit X, then hit the minus sign, and then hit 5. Okay, now graph that. Okay, this is looking pretty good. And if we say that's the origin, go down 1, down 2, down 3, down 4, down 5, y-intercept of -5. So I'm fairly confident that we're right. All right, so back here, we've really been forced by the preponderance of evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that B is the correct answer for number 8. Okay, and finally, let me stack this a little bit. We are now going to sketch the graph of each linear inequality. Okay, now before we do that, I think it'd be really helpful to do a little mini tutorial on the symbols. We have less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Okay, this is less than. This is greater than. This is less than or equal to. And this is greater than or equal to. It wouldn't be the worst use of your time to just take a minute and write that down when you get started on your test. Just write that down. You know you're going to need it, so why not write it down? And then remind yourself of this. With less than, I'm going to have a dashed line. With greater than, I'll have a dashed line. With less than or equal to, I'll have a solid line. And with greater than or equal to, I'll have a solid line. Now what about the shading? Well, with less than, I'm going to shade below the line. With greater than, I'm going to shade above the line. With less than or equal to, I'm going to shade below the line, okay, including the line, careful, and then greater than or equal to, I'm going to shade above the line, including the line, like that, okay? So again, this is solid gold. This should be part of your toolkit that you're going to write down when you start the test. Okay, so freeze frame that, take a picture of it, screenshot it, take a snippet, send it to yourself, write it down, whatever you have to do to preserve this in your memory. Because at this point in the semester, when you see this symbol, your brain, just like that, should snap to less than, dotted line, shaded below. This one, greater than, dotted line, shaded above. Less than or equal to, solid line, shaded below. Greater than or equal to, solid line, shaded above. Memorize this, right? Memorize this. You know, I know they say no memorization in modern education. Wrong. Memorize this. It will save your life over and over again. Okay, back to the problems. So let's start getting these graphs ready to go. So here we're adding this layer of complexity because now it's not an equal sign, it's a linear inequality symbol or an inequality symbol in a linear inequality. So now let me write this out. 7x minus y is greater than or equal to 4. Now, the first step here is solved exactly like it would be if that was an equal sign. I'll subtract 7x from both sides. On the left side, it cancels, leaving, let me move this over a little bit, negative y greater than or equal to negative 7x plus 4. Now, what to do? Okay. This negative y is really negative 1y. So again, there's a quick way to do this and kind of like the technically correct way to do this. The quick way to do this would be to flip that sign and change all the signs. All right, so since I showed the hard way first, this time I'll show the easy way. The easy way is to just say, well, that's negative, I'm going to make it positive. So that's y. I'm going to flip the sign because I'm changing the signs, and I know that means I'm really dividing everything by a negative, and since I'm dividing by a negative in linear inequalities, I have to flip the sign when dividing by a negative or multiplying by a negative. I'm going to flip the sign. Now it's less than or equal to. Change this sign, 7x, and change this sign to minus 4. Okay? So that's kind of the quick way. If you can just visually see that, then you can do that. It doesn't, you know, in some cases you kind of need to do it the harder way. So let's go, let me just leave that there for those students who kind of get this, and let's go back to what we had, negative y greater than or equal to minus 7x plus 4. And remember, like I said, there's a little 1 hiding right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide each term by negative 1. When I divide by negative 1, I have to flip the sign. When you multiply or divide by a negative, you must flip the inequality symbol. Okay, super critical. So, moving on, let's just pick this up here. These negative ones cancel, leaving y by itself on the left. Now I've got to flip the sign. So it was greater than or equal to, and now it's less than or equal to. Negative 7 over negative 1 is positive 7. So I can just write 7x. And then positive 4 over negative 1 gives me negative 4. So y less than or equal to 7x minus 4. So in slope-intercept form, this is y less than or equal to mx plus b. Okay, the m is 7, and the b, or the y-intercept, is negative 4. So let's go hunting for the correct answer. First, let's look for the y-intercept of negative 4 and eliminate the choices that we can eliminate. Okay, this has a positive y-intercept, so it can't be A. Okay, that has a y-intercept at negative 4. See? So it could be B. C also has a y-intercept of negative 4, so we'll kind of hang on to those two. Now this one again has a positive y-intercept, so it can't be D. So now I'm down to just B and C. Which one is it? Well, take a look at the slope and ask yourself, is the 7 sitting right there positive or negative? Okay, remember, if the slope is like a mountain, positive slopes going up the mountain, okay? Negative slope is going down the mountain. So you have to ask yourself, which one do I have? Do I have a line that looks like this, or a line that looks like this? Well, that's a positive slope, so I'm going to be going uphill. That means I can eliminate this one because that is very steep and downward sloping, which leaves us with B. Now, there was a trick here, and I'll show it now. This inequality symbol, less than or equal to, it's going to require a solid line. Okay, so another way you can eliminate answer choices is by eliminating any dashed lines. Okay, plot twist, A, C, and D all have dashed lines, so they cannot be correct, and only B has a solid line. So for all those reasons, we're going to choose B. Okay, moving on to number 10, the last problem. You've made it, you've survived. We have 3x minus 4y less than negative 12. Sorry, you couldn't see me writing that. Okay, 3x minus 4y less than negative 12. Okay, my first step is to subtract 3x from both sides. On the left, they cancel. I'm going to move this over. I've got negative 4y less than, now be careful here, we're going to write negative 3x first, and then bring that negative 12 in behind it, negative 12. Okay, so now I have to divide everything by this thing, negative 4, that's sitting partnered with the y. It's multiplied by y. So I'm going to divide each term by -4. If I'm careful, I can save myself a little time. Okay, alert, alert, sign flip. Because we divided by a negative number. So on the left, these cancel. I have y, flip the sign, greater than. Now look what I've got, -3 over -4. The negatives will cancel out. So this becomes +3 over +4. So 3/4 x. Okay, now again, I've got negative over a negative. So those negatives become positive. And 12 divided by 4 is 3. So I write +3. Now this one, because it's not such a weird slope, we can actually graph before we look at the answer choices. And I really think you should always try to hand graph, especially if you're new to this. You need to get a feel for how these are going to look. Nothing beats doing it the old-fashioned way. I don't care how cool those calculators are. So starting at 0, we're going to go to a y-intercept of +3, up 1, up 2, up 3, and plot that point. Now I should be super careful right here, because now, and I'll do this with a different color, now I'm not just plotting a line, I'm plotting an inequality. And actually, this is a greater than symbol, so it means it does not include points on the line. So I'm going to put an open circle around that point, so I know not to include it. But while I'm graphing, I need to mark it out somehow. So now we're at a y-intercept of 3. Sorry, can't read that. The y-intercept is 3. Okay, right there. So now my slope tells me to rise 3 and then run 4. Up 3, over 4 to the right. So go up 1, up 2, up 3, then over 1, over 2, over 3, over 4. Okay, so there's another point, and I'm going to indicate that with a circle. So I know. And now I can connect these with a dotted line. Like that. And y is greater than the dotted line, okay? Now, don't get motion sickness. Let's go back here. The greater than symbol means I've got a dotted line and I'm shading above it. So, back to our problem. I'm going to shade above that dotted line. Just like that. So I'm looking for something that looks like that. My key marker is going to be the y-intercept. Okay, so are there any solid lines that I can get rid of right away? Nope, I'm going to have to think about this. Okay, we can automatically eliminate anything that's shaded below the line. Okay, so that means we can eliminate A, and the rest of these are shaded above the line. So we're going to have to think about them. So now we'll focus on the y-intercept. I need a y-intercept of +3. All right, so we eliminated A. Let's look at B. This has a y-intercept of -4, so it can't be B. C has a y-intercept of -3, so it can't be C because we need +3. And D has a y-intercept, look at it carefully, of 3. So does D look like our graph? Yeah, it does. It looks a lot like it. So the answer is D. All right. Well, I hope that was useful to you. We'll just quickly review these answer choices. 1 was A, 2 was D, 3 was A, 4 was C, 5 was C, 6 was D, 7 was C, 8 was B, 9 was B, and 10 was D. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Ran a little bit long, but guys, and I can't stress this enough, practicing this single assignment right here will do more for you in the next 3 or 4 years of your high school career, and then into your college years, and even beyond your college years, into graduate school and in life. Practice this assignment. All the other stuff we do is kind of window dressing on this core. This is the core of algebra right here. So please practice this. If you can do this, passing the STAAR test and getting a good grade in class and having fun with mathematics is going to be well within your reach.